Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's training session. We are waiting for all the participants to enter the room, so we appreciate if you don't mind waiting a little bit until we start the training. It will be very shortly. Thank you. Okay, I think we are almost all of us here, so I believe we can start. First of all, we will have a small introduction by Wen Song, the representative of Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce. So please, Wen.
Thank you very much, Laura. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And for those who are in China, good afternoon. On behalf of the EU-China Business Association, the EU SME Centre, Eurochambres, and the Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce, we warmly welcome you to our webinar focused on the opportunities in China's green construction sector. The Chinese construction market is one of the largest construction markets in the world, and it is likely to keep growing. It is forecasted to grow at an annual average of 5% until 2023. The Chinese government has demonstrated strong commitment to making green building a top priority by promoting more energy efficient buildings. They offer great potential for European SMEs operating in the sector. In fact, by 2030, 2/3 of the Chinese population is going to live in urban areas, and Chinese authorities are already planning to build 50,000 new multi-floor residential buildings and 170 new mass transit rail and undergrounds. New business opportunities will also arise, as at the end of last year, the European Union and China concluded negotiations and reached agreement in principle on the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, the CAI. The agreement grants European investors a greater level of access to China's market and will level the playing field for European businesses in China. So China is really a market which cannot be ignored. During this training session, our experts will analyze the regulatory and policy framework of the green construction sector and provide practical information for those companies interested in accessing the Chinese construction sector. Our experts today are Mr. Gianluca Chiara, Managing Director, G-Power Consulting Company. Normally he's living in Beijing, but now staying in Rome because of the COVID-19. And Ms. Jing Ma, Senior Low Carbon Urban Planner of Nordic Group China. During these difficult times, the EU-China Business Association acts as an important bridge to promote the economic and trade relations between China and the EU. The association is the Association of Bilateral China Business Associations in Europe. Today we have 20 member associations and represent more than 25,000 European and Chinese companies. Let me say a few words about the Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce. The FCCC assists Flemish companies doing business with China and helps Chinese companies to find partners in Belgium. Our chamber was founded by the largest investors from Belgium and China, and our aim is to help Belgian companies grow in China and to assist Chinese companies. We provide a weekly China business newsletter, organize webinars on how not to do business with China, and give expert advice. Normally, we also receive many Chinese delegations, but of course, due to COVID-19, this cannot happen, and we hopefully in the second half of the year, this can start again, but we will have to wait for that. So this was in a nutshell on what we can do for you. Before ending a practical point, you can ask questions via the Q&A button and they will be answered after the questions. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Gianluca Chiara. Mr. Gianluca, thank you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. And as it was said, good afternoon for people that are living in China. Now I will share I would like
Gianluca, sorry,
yes.
hold on a second. Before we start, sorry for stepping in. We are going to make a small introduction of the EU SME Centre. I am aware that most of the participants today already know about us, so I'm not going to make a very extensive presentation, but just few lines and few ideas of how we also can help in cooperation with Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce. For those who don't know about us, the USME Centre is a EU-founded project that starts in 2010 from the European Commission. Right now, we are on the third phase, running until March 2022. Our aim is to help those European small and medium enterprises interested in doing business with China. This could be through trading or through the establishment of a legal entity in the country. At the moment, we are implemented by 5 chambers of commerce and business organizations. You can see them all in the lowest part of the screen. And we partner with government agencies and business support organizations such as the Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce to bring all these trainings and knowledge to European SMEs. We have offices in Beijing, and thanks to Eurochambres, we have a representative office in Brussels as well. We have 4 main services. The first one is called the Knowledge Center. I usually like to call it the online library, where you can find around 200 market reports, guidelines and case studies on a wide variety of sectors, including cross-border e-commerce, digital marketing, healthcare, food and beverage. You name it, you have it. We try to keep all these reports updated, and you can actually download them from our website for free. The second service is called the Advice Center. We have one-to-one confidential consultation services. You can see actually here a screenshot of our website. By clicking in this section, you can actually get to this interface where actually you can submit questions regarding to advocacy, business development, training and HR, legal, standard and conformity, and others. Normally, our team of experts will reply to your questions within 3 or 4 working days. The second service, and today is a very good example, our trainings normally are offline. Unfortunately, now we have to do them online for European SMEs interested in learning more about the Chinese market. Normally, we offer trainings on different topics. Obviously, the most interesting ones are usually related to e-commerce, especially nowadays, digital marketing, also trade fair preparation, or for instance, up-to-date topics such as blockchain technology. In any case, we can actually tailor-made all these trainings based on the needs of the companies, the European SMEs. And last but not least, we have an advocacy platform. We have, thanks to the support with the European Chambers of Commerce China, we can give voice to those SMEs that are looking for a more play-level field in China and try to get some influence into the regulatory market. Here you can see an insight of the partners with whom we collaborate. There are partners from all around Europe. Of course, here is the Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce, our loyal partner as well. And if you are a business support organization and you would like to organize trainings similar to the one we are organizing today, please feel free to contact me. Just last slide before giving the floor to Gianluca. We have a lot of upcoming events and activities. We invite you to stay tuned thanks to our newsletter and through our website. The most next week, actually, we have an event on blockchain technologies where actually the director of the EU SME Centre is going to be one of the speakers. So if the topic is interesting to you or you want to learn more about the opportunities for EU SMEs on blockchain, we invite you to join. We are also organizing events on setting up foreign entities in China. Something in the pipeline is coming also regarding medical devices or about e-commerce in China. And here we have a small intro about Gianluca, although Wen already made a small presentation. Just to say that Gianluca has been an expert of the EU SME Centre for quite a long time. We have organized articles, market reports, and events with him. And he holds an MBA from Beijing University. apart from being the managing director of GIA Power. About the second speaker, Jingjin, who is going to talk after Gianluca. She is the general manager of Nordic Group China. Jingjin actually also holds an MBA from Beijing University. She's the co-founder of Nordic Group in Denmark, and she has over 17 years of professional experience in matters or issues related to the green construction sector, climate change, low carbon city planning, etc. Apart from that, Jingjin has been involved in over 80 renewable energy projects in China and abroad. And now, Gianluca, I leave the floor to you because I believe the audience is more interested in hearing you than me. Welcome, and please.
So first of all, let me thank you, the EU SME Centre, and for this kind invitation and introduction. Now, without any further delays, I will share my screen. May I?
Yes, please.
Okay. Share screen. Okay. Is it working properly?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
It's not, okay, now it's perfect.
So again, thanks again for this kind introduction. And as it was said before, we were called today in order to talk about the Chinese green construction sector. Of course, what we are going to do, or at least in my presentation, as you can see from the agenda, is to give an administrative and legislative background, so to understand how China is moving within the green construction sector. And throughout these two areas, I will try to provide some further thoughts regarding opportunities for European SMEs, in particular those that are still in Europe. And we all hope that after this crisis of COVID, it will be easier to go into the Chinese market to develop a successful business. So I will provide some example ideas and potential areas where business can be profitable. So as it was also introduced earlier, of course, the Chinese green construction sector is extremely important. It's in particular, in the recently, in the last 10 years, China has been pushing a lot and providing a lot of funds in this area. This happened because, as we all know, the construction sector, but in particular the building sector, in China 10, 15 years ago was not modern. And consequently, China started this way to renew the sector, like it happened in many others, like water energy, renewable energies, and so forth. Now, what is important to say is that many steps forward were done, but what is clear is that the construction sector will continue to grow for at least 10 to 15 years. Now, when we talk about SMEs, it means that we need somehow to focus the needs of SMEs, their power, and also understand how the market is moving according, of course, in terms of business opportunities. So, and that's why in this slide, I try to focus more towards the building sector and the role of Chinese municipalities. This is done because usually SMEs, in the moment that they're present in the Chinese market or they want to join the market, most of the times, of course, they have to do it participating or creating relationships relationships with local companies, or in particular, they will have to join local projects. So they need to work with Chinese municipalities rather than with central level government. On this regard, what is important to say is that, of course, we all know, but living in China, as it was introduced, I've been living for 15 years in China. I just came back for Christmas and now I'm trying to go back. China is a really big country. So an opportunity sometimes can represent also a limit. What I want to say is that as China is so big and variegated, it's evident that throughout the countries, all municipalities are pushing in order to sustain the green construction sector. But of course, they do it in different ways, according to their geographic position and according to the level of finance they have in terms of the power that they have. And consequently, for SMEs, it's very important to take into account every different aspect. This somehow brings us to talk about the administrative background. Now, it's evident, and we all know, that China is a centralized country. This means that, of course, the central government has a very important role. The government somehow has a role of an umbrella covering every major aspect of the country and providing the line, the direction for municipalities, local governments, and companies that has to be followed. When we talk about construction sector, the three major government ministries involved are NDRC, ME, in particular when we think about climate change or GHG emissions, and MOHORD when we talk about urban planning. What is important to say is that starting from at least 10 years ago, the central government started to approve a set of laws pushing municipalities in order to upgrade the construction sector. Said that, what is very important to say is that the role of municipalities is still very important. We will see throughout the presentation how active are municipalities, in particular under the support of MOHOR, so the Ministry of Urban Planning, in developing green construction projects. And in particular, and the role of municipalities is particularly important in multiple areas. As you can see from this slide, of course, the role is very important when we talk about, for instance, the green building sector. And green buildings means many things. It means, of course, building efficiency, district heating. It means, of course, retrofit for public buildings and so on. But where municipalities are involved are also areas like the one highlighted, the water sector, solid waste, energy. Because when we talk about construction sector, we are talking about many different areas. And of course, all those areas have to be sustained and connected in order, of course, to develop a sustainable green construction sector. Moving on, as somehow I was introducing before, we have to say that the central government started since 10 years ago a big and new area in order to move from a construction sector towards a green construction sector. As we can see, somehow this moving started in every major area in China. we can talk about energy, water, not specifically related, of course, to the construction sector. This was done for multiple reasons, of course. First of all, the government wanted, of course, to control the level of pollution. And we know that the level of pollution, in particular greenhouse gases in cities, is extremely high. But this was done also to support the renewal of local industry. Because, of course, at that point, going around China, it was evident that the quality of, for instance, buildings in cities was pretty backward compared to the one in Europe. And then there was, of course, the need to sustain the request of people. Of course, Chinese cities are more and more aware about living in livable cities. Not now because of COVID, but Chinese citizens travel around the world. Now they're more and more cautious about living in beautiful cities, green cities, sustainable cities. And consequently, for all these reasons, the central government sustained this shift. Now, here you can see some of the main legislation that were approved throughout the years, specifically in this case about the green building sector. Of course, there are many more in the green building sector, but in all the different sectors that are related to the construction sector. Of course, due to a limitation of time, I couldn't list them all. But as you can see, specifically about the green building sector, there are new regulations in many different areas, such as design, constructions, and operation. Of course, what we have to keep in mind is that, for instance, when we talk about green building means also in this case, many things. We go from a traditional green building, so let's say sustainable buildings done for factories or for living, but now China is more and more developing also passive house, low energy building, zero energy building. So again, also in this case, we are talking about a very variegated sector. On this slide, I would like to emphasize the new assessment standard for green building. I will emphasize during this presentation about two regulations. This is the first one. This was approved from MOHURD, the Ministry of Urban Planning. It was extremely important because somehow this regulation wanted to give an overall idea and regulation towards the whole municipal green building sector. As you can see from this slide, the regulation goes to touch upon many different aspects in terms of city planning, for instance. This is extremely important because, for instance, if you know a little bit about China, you know how in the past cities were not properly planned. And this brought in many troubles in terms, for instance, of energy efficiency, in terms of traffic control, in terms of water management, waste management, and so forth. But this regulation goes to touch upon aspects like also quality of urban building, quality of life for citizens in the building, and so forth. Another very important regulation is the Green Building Evaluation Standard. This was approved earlier, we can see in 2015, and throughout the years it received, of course, a series of amendments and improvements. But this happens basically with any national or provincial laws or regulation. Once it's approved from the central or provincial level government, throughout the years, there are always amendments done based on the experience that it is done locally and consequently improved. What is important about the green building evaluation standard, or as it is called in China, the Freestart System, is that for the first time, China wanted to upgrade itself at the same level as Europe and the US. In fact, the Freestart System is very similar to the LEED system in US. With this Freestart System, what Mohud wanted to do was, first of all, to provide a first attempt to create a local green building standard first. Of course, they wanted to provide a direction towards the development of good quality and green building, create a important separation between residential and public buildings. And in order to do that, the system somehow lists 6 major categories that need to be taken into account in the moment that any developer presents a project to a municipality to develop buildings or green buildings in China. Now, what is important to say is that, of course, the importance of this regulation was done, of course, to push developers and municipalities in order to move forward green building. So when we talk about the Freestart System, it's pretty obvious. Freestars means good quality building. It means green building. Even though, of course, I mentioned before that green buildings has many internal differentiation. But the Freestart System was a way for the central government to push municipalities and developers only to focus on good quality buildings, on green buildings, because those are easier to be approved. The table, very simply, summarize the items that for each of the 6 main categories need to be reached by the developer and later on by the municipalities that somehow will verify those in order to be categorized as a Freestart project. The idea of reaching a certain amount of items for each category is kept open for a simple reason. As I was mentioning before, China is a pretty big and broad country. We have extremely developed cities, less developed cities. We have cities, of course, from the north, from the south, so different climate, different needs. So all the sub-items present in the 6 major categories are done in order to allow freedom to municipalities in order to define and decide which are the items that they think they are more important to be developed in terms of also local business opportunities. And consequently, throughout choosing these items, also give the freedom to developers to present different kinds of projects. Now, all this said, as you can see from this slide, the Freestart System somehow is a push, not an obligation, of course, for developers, as I was mentioning before, to develop good quality buildings. From my experience, what I can tell you is that in the last 3-4 years, I've been called only to support the development of Freestar's project. Somehow, all the legislations that were approved created a sort of a green wave in the construction sector, pushing, creating a sort of bottom-up approach. In the past, it was more the central government pushing developers towards greening any different sector. Somehow, what was effective from all the legislations that have been approved is that it created a sort of bottom-up approach. So are the developers that want to develop, for instance, green building projects, are the municipalities that want to develop and approve good quality projects and programs. And consequently, the big difference compared to the past is that the whole country somehow is involved in this, of course, modernization. So one way that has been used, for instance, by the central government to develop the green construction sector has been the creation of eco-cities. What is important to say, for instance, about eco-cities is that this approach started around 20 years ago, together with the creation also, I'm sure you heard about it, such as industrial park, eco park, and so forth. The goal from the central government was double. On one way, the goal was, of course, to control GHG emissions in cities, but what was more important was the idea to create some clusters, some areas where best technologies available, the typical BAT, could be developed. When we talk about Chinese eco-cities, in reality, I have to say, we are talking about a local district, of course, not cities. So in the moment that you go in specific cities like Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, and many others, I have to say, you will find that there is a certain district where where only specific kind of companies are welcome and only specific level of buildings have been developed. I'm sharing this information for you because then this is all related, of course, to possible business opportunities. In the moment that there is a trend towards greening a country, of course, this brings opportunities for companies, for European companies, in order to somehow develop a cooperation with Chinese entities and being involved in projects. What is very important to say, in particular regarding eco-cities, is that they also represent a way for European SMEs, in particular those that are still in Europe, but they want to enter into Chinese market, in order to do it in an easier way. I will explain myself, and we will see this aspect also later on. As I was telling you, China is a very big country, and within the green construction sector, you have, as many of you that are listening to this webinar, very different kind of companies. You can have architectural planner, or you can have companies providing specific techniques or mechanical equipment and so forth. What is interesting to say is that many eco-cities, as I was telling you before, welcome, of course, green companies. And for welcome, I mean that, for instance, they can provide support in the registration of the company. They can provide, for instance, discount in the rent of an office. They can provide support for instance, in creating connection between the companies and presence within these, let's say, eco-district. More so, consequently, what is very important also about eco-cities is that those represent also an element of competition, positive competition, among different municipalities developing such kind of projects. And it's not a coincidence that, as you can see from this slide, many of the most successful projects have been developed throughout bilateral cooperation program, such as with Germany and Sweden and United Kingdom, Singapore, and so forth. And this represents a level also of opportunity for European companies, because of course, all these eco-cities will always follow a certain standard. And being involved in such areas, of course, it can be a good door entry into the Chinese market. Another important element that rarely is taken into account is the Chinese green municipal finance. Now, we always hear about China, how big it is, how strong, all the amount of projects that are developed, how rich is China, and so forth. In some ways, this is true, but it's important to say that the level of local finance is very different from the level of national finance. There are two very important aspects to be taken into account. First, the majority of taxes paid by people are not kept locally, but are controlled centrally. Means that municipalities, at the end, they don't have a very strong financing power. The second aspect to be taken into account is that the level of municipal debt is extremely high. And years ago, the Chinese central government decided to put a cap towards this debt, obliging municipalities to develop projects that could be sustainable from an environmental point of view, but also from a financial point of view. Now, we know very well that in the past, for instance, municipalities were enlarging their financing in two very easy ways: selling the land and asking for finance, for instance, to Chinese banks or even national banks. Now, these two ways were very much used, profitable, but this cannot be done anymore. It cannot be done anymore because, as you might have heard, the cost of, for instance, an apartment per square meter in China is skyrocketing, and the Chinese central government put, also in this case, a stop to the raise of the prices. Second, because Chinese municipalities are not anymore allowed in order to ask for financing that is not sustainable. Because, of course, imagine in the past, any municipality could go to any bank to ask for money, and no one was saying no. It's pretty evident. Now the situation is completely changed. And you can see from this slide somehow how, of course, it works. In the past, Chinese municipalities had to focus only on the left side of this table, so the financing part. Think about a project and look for money. Now the situation is completely different because they have to focus towards also the right side of the table. So they have to focus towards the funding part, which means for every RMB that they receive from a bank, they have to develop projects that are bankable, and consequently they have to give it back. And this is a game changer. Is a game changer also from in terms of a business opportunity, because as we know, in the past, many municipalities received funds from the central government or Chinese banks because they were presenting the idea of developing a green project. It could be in the construction sector, but many others, of course. And in the reality, let's say that this project was not as green as it was planned. Now this cannot be done anymore. The project, once that is designed and receive the financing, has to be developed exactly as is planned. And in this slide, somehow, you see a summary of all the aspects that a municipality has to take into account. Of course, when we talk about green finance, it's important to say that at a national level, green finance is very much developed. It's at the municipal level that is less developed. Imagine a municipality, something that happened in Europe something like 30, 40 years ago, that was used simply to go to a bank and receive open door, now has to switch mentally completely its approach. So first of all, they have to understand which kind of financing tool they have to use. Second, they have to define the sector that in particular they want to approach. And then they have to manage the many, as you can see, operational and institutional challenges that are within the development of any green construction project. The key in any project is bankability. The project has to be sustainable in terms of green and in terms of financing. Why this is important also for companies or foreign companies working in the green construction sector? Because as introduced from the administrative point of view, the legislative point of view, all these elements somehow wants to trigger the fact that Chinese developers, Chinese municipalities are somehow obliged in order to develop only green and sustainable projects. Another very important element. In the moment that a project is not well designed, it can be from a technological point of view, it can be from a financial point of view. For the first time, and it happened many, many times, you cannot imagine how many, this is rejected by banks. And this is another game changer, of course. So in recent years, I've been involved in several of these projects in different municipalities. And I can tell you that the screening of a green municipal finance project is extremely careful. It's done from, for instance, international banks like ADB, ICF, World Bank, but also the same screening is done from local banks. And this is done because now banks know that if the municipality will not repay their debt, there is not anymore the support from the central level government. And this is an opportunity also in terms of business, because it means that in the moment that the project is defined and presented, all the technologies that are listed, those will be implemented. And consequently, municipalities and local developers are looking for instance, European consulting companies that support them in designing a green municipal project, or in the moment that they define which sector, as it was listed in the previous slide, they want to approach. They are looking in many cases for foreign companies to be to be a support in developing a certain solution, to be partner for local Chinese companies that don't have enough experience to develop such a project. And somehow, of course, this is an additional opportunity. Now, all these elements said, of course, somehow highlight two big important points. First, as it was said, China for at least 10 to 15 years will continue to push towards the improvement and the development of Chinese green construction sector. And what is important to say is that due to the fact that the country, I mentioned that before, is extremely variegated, there are a lot of different areas that still need to be tackled, in particular from local governments. So these represent an opportunity for European SMEs, because it means that it's pretty much, it's very much difficult to say which technology can be profitable or not in China. If you work, for instance, in niche areas, in very high-tech areas, probably you will have to approach more first, second-tier cities, the planning of eco-cities, eco-parks. But even if you have a very stable but up-to-grade, let's say, traditional technology, also in terms of equipment, this still represents an opportunity, in particular in a smaller project, third, fourth-tier city. Of course, all this said, we don't have to think that China is heaven. In China, there are still a lot of problems, of course, and challenges that need to be taken into account. First of all, even though many laws, regulations, new standards have been approved, the work is not done yet. A lot of work still needs to be done. There are a lot of controversy regulations that have been approved. In some cases, those are too strict and it's very difficult for the municipalities to be followed. In our case, they are too vague, and of course, this gives too much room for local developers to move around this gray area. Another important element to be taken into account is the market and the social needs. When we think about the green construction sector, or in particular in municipality, the green building sector, we have to think that all Chinese cities don't have the same level of, for instance, financial power, or in terms of technology development. What is important to say is that any project has to be sustainable. And of course, any developer in China, like in Europe, presents projects that can be profitable. Now, there are still a lot of elements that somehow block the presentation of project applying best available techniques. First of all, as mentioned before, municipalities don't have a very strong financing power. Second, this is a big discussion. We have been discussing this for 10 years in China. There is still a cap towards energy fees, water fees, heating fees, and this is a strong limitation for municipalities to regain the investment that they opened. And then there is also somehow a blockage coming from citizens as well, because of course technologies are expensive. Developing good quality buildings means that those will be more expensive. But in many areas of China, average revenue for any Chinese citizen is still very low. It's not, of course, like in Beijing or Shanghai. To give you an example, 3 years ago, I was called from a municipality. I can tell you the name, no secret. Zhuzhou is a third-tier city, and they had developed a extremely good passive house project. Now you have a lot of passive house projects developed in China. Successful, people love it, people buy the house. But in this case, this project, I've been there, I've seen it, the apartments were amazing, European technology, but the municipality was desperate because no one was buying the apartments for the simple reason that the initial investment was too high and the average salary in such municipality didn't allow people in order to engage on such investment. Consequently, we were called in order, because we were asked how we could support them in helping, in mobilizing the interest of the citizen in order to understand that living in such apartments, of course, was better for them. But there was one limitation, that the payback period was counted from 8 to 10 years. This because, as I was telling you, the saving in energy, heating, and so forth was high, but low in terms of pricing. And in China, there are still a very, I would say, flexible society, where in particular, young generation buy an apartment, but they think to move again in 5, 10 years, once they have a kid, or maybe go into a bigger apartment once their parents go to live with them. And all these aspects somehow were represented a constraint. Finally, what we have to take into account is to summarize whatever has been said in these around 30 minutes and verify where and how European companies, in particular those not present on the Chinese market, can approach the green construction sector and develop a profitable business. So where are the opportunities? Somehow I already replied to this question. This is the typical question I'm constantly asked. Usually the question I'm asked for each sector can be construction, can be water, whatever, is give me a list of the technologies that the Chinese market wants. Tell me where I have, where there is a good approach, and so forth. It's not possible to reply to such a question. I said that before. The opportunities are listed in this slide, are within the numbers. But as I was somehow introducing before, it's very difficult to say if a technology can or cannot enter a market that is so big and so variegated. It depends a lot on the local needs. And it depends a lot on, of course, the kind of technologies that you have and how you want to approach the market itself. This is it's a key element that really you need to take into account. It's not just trying to find the synthesis and understand if a technology works or doesn't work. Theoretically, everything works. It depends on how you want to develop your know-how, where, and what is most important, of course, understanding the shifting of the market. Said that, of course, it's evident that China represents a good opportunity for European SMEs. It is calculated that at least 10 to 15% of the overall investment in the Chinese green construction sector can go to foreign companies. And this is evident because if you go around China, as was said, I live in China. In this moment, I cannot, unfortunately. You can see that the level of, in particular, for instance, the building sector is still extremely low. And consequently, there is the need of technologies, of also stable technologies. Chinese companies are looking to upgrade their system because this is requested from the market itself. So it's not anymore just a matter of business. It's a matter of following this big green wave that was started from the central government. So here there is some hints that I would like to provide to European SMEs. First of all, the Chinese market, I said that before, is extremely profitable, but it's very complex because it's very much diversified. This means that you really need to do your homework. What is good is that as Chinese companies have been traveling so much in the past before COVID, they learned to appreciate the role of European SMEs. Before, Chinese companies were looking only for big brands, but this is not the reality anymore. So this represents another good opportunity. But what it's important to say is that it's fundamental to develop a good business strategy. So it's fundamental because this will save you a lot of time and money, of course. So you need to understand according to your technology if you want to enter in which cities, why. For instance, if you are a consulting company, probably you will enter into major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, or Shenzhen. But if you are a construction company or you build equipment, for instance, probably you will enter into second, third-tier cities, industrial park, eco park, and so on. Finally, what is important to say is that, of course, your technology needs to be localized. So it means that it's not that whatever you do in Europe, you can simply replicate in China or think that the Chinese, for instance, partner businesses will accept. It needs to be localized to the market. And this will oblige you, of course, to protect your know-how and IP. So in order to conclude and give the floor to the colleague, Jingjing Ma, of course, again, Chinese market can be profitable, but what is important for you is to understand every aspect of the market, the good parts, but also the difficult parts. The green construction sector is looking for different kind of technologies, from the so-called stable companies, I call it like this. So for the development of standard green buildings to very high-end technologies, like for the development of zero energy building, or for technologies that can really support a reduction in terms of energy use and water use. What is important, of course, is to analyze the market and understand that these opportunities are real, of course, but we all hope that after COVID, we will be able to travel again. What is important again is that the Chinese market is open. There is still the need for foreign technology, but of course, take into account that a greater look from the government is given for local companies, and of course, we are looking for a sharing of cooperation between Europe and China. Thank you very much.